Hello everyone and welcome to my latest video. Today we're here to talk about the GFX100 Mark II as well as the 55, can you see that? 55mm f1.7 RWR, and so it's about a 45mm equivalent in full frame, but this is one big lens, but f1.7 at digital media format is pretty darn bright. And so I had an opportunity to go to Stockholm, and so thank you Billy and Mark and Francis and the rest of Fujifilm Canada team, as well as Fujifilm Japan, Yuji and Aki and Makoto and the rest of the team as well. I had a great time in Stockholm, and of course we were there for the launch of this camera, but I only had like a day and a half, 2 days, and as well you're just kind of having fun being in Stockholm. So I didn't get a lot of chance to shoot with it. I did go down into the metro system. I took some pretty cool handheld shots with the 32-64, which is one of my favorite zoom lenses on the GFX mount. Got some amazing photos. And now if you have the GFX100S, the original GFX100, or you have this one, 102 megapixels is 102 megapixels. And so if you do have the older ones, let's talk about that a little bit later, but just quickly, I don't know if it's the right time to upgrade unless you don't mind taking a financial hit to get the advantage of the new processor here. So this is the X Processor 5, which is in the new XH series and the new XT5, as well as the XS20 in the new 5th generation X series. It's now in the GFX series, and so everything is faster, everything's more efficient. So I think Fujifilm says twice as powerful, same time it's more battery efficient. And so if you have the older version of this camera here, the GFX100, couple of things, you have the older processor in there, as well you have the older battery. You have the MPT125, which is the battery they came out with for the GFX series, but now they just gone with this MPW235, which is in the X series. So in terms of ecosystem, if you have some X series and you have GFX, it makes sense to move up either to the GFX100S, which also uses the newer battery, and now the new GFX100 Mark II also has a new battery. As well, the GFX100, it had that huge it was like a battery grip, vertical grip that was integrated. It wasn't removable, and I never liked that. I thought that the GFX100 was really a studio camera, but you couldn't really, like someone like myself who travels, who does mostly, urban landscape, street photography, it just was too much camera for me. Even the GFX100S is too much camera for me anyways, and so that one was just a monster. So I reviewed it once, and I never asked to borrow it again just because of the size and weight. And so having it smaller like this is heavier than the GFX100S by a little bit, but in terms of price, the GFX100 came out at $10,000. This is $7,500. The GFX100S was $5,900, so it's only a $1,500 price difference. So it makes sense that Fujifilm now, I think on B&H, is an $800 price drop on the GFX100S. And so if you want a good deal on a 100 megapixel medium format camera, then getting the GFX100S is actually a pretty darn good deal at $51.99 or whatever the price is right now at B&H. But if you want the latest and greatest, especially if you need something that's modular, I think that's really the point. I'll insert some photos and some B-rolls, but really this is the articulating attachment that you can put on the GFX100 here. So you could take it off like this, like the original GFX100 as well as the original GFX50S. It comes off and you can just put the cover plate here. I know some photographers actually just want to keep it small and compact, and if you want to do that, you just want this little box. You have an articulating screen this way. You can go out and shoot if you don't want to use the EVF. But if you do want to use the EVF, then you just pop it on like this. You're getting 9.44 million dots of resolution. I mean, that's very high. Even the rear 3.2 inch screen here is like 2.3 something million dot. There's more pixels in the LCD screen than some previous generation cameras EVF. So that's very high resolution LCD. So if you don't use the EVF, you got a really nice LCD that you can punch in. If you take a picture, you want to check for sharpness and things like that. But having this, you can see the distance here. So if you have a larger nose, I do not, but if you do have a larger nose and you find that oftentimes your nose is touching the touch screen, well, having this distance is great. And then again, if you add this swivel attachment, if you're shooting down, straight down like this, or at some odd angle. I met a videographer in Stockholm, and I'll maybe put in a B-roll, but he had his entire system all set up for video, and he says he loves that swivel capability. So let's just talk a little bit about video. Here in Vancouver, when I had this camera, I did not test any video because I don't think this, at least for me, it's way more than I need, and I don't think it's yet ready for, let's just say, YouTubers. YouTubers aren't going to buy this to shoot video, I don't think. I think these are basically meant for real cinematographers, people who are actually doing TV shows, movies, very specific video-centric projects, and they have, you can get the PL adapters. Fujifilm even gave you a chart and showed you all the different types of mounts that you can put. You can get a PL mount adapter, you can put anamorphic lenses, you can actually do the D-squeeze on the screen here so you can actually see what it looks like with the anamorphic lenses. As well, use different formats like, full frame, and you can use Super 35. And so you can't use the entire sensor yet for video, but I think the future is coming where you eventually can do it. And that's why I'm saying this is not yet ready for that, and maybe a video-centric GFX. So maybe if there's a GFX100 Mark II, I think the previous S stood for speed, and so if they can make this even faster, which I think the only way they could do it is by upgrading the sensor, and they would need to partner with Sony to convince them to create a stacked version of this 100 megapixel sensor, and that might not happen. Maybe they'll do it with the 50 megapixel, but it comes down to how many units Fujifilm is willing to promise to buy or have manufactured before they would do it. But I think a 50 megapixel stacked medium format sensor would actually be kind of cool, and then be able to do the entire open gate reading. So it's almost square, right? 4:3 aspect ratio. So imagine being able to do open gate shooting both vertical and horizontal in camera for videographers with the faster reading sensor. I think that's really the Achilles heel, because this does use the CF Express slot here. I've talked about this quite a bit when I first got the XH2S. Per Gear sent me this. This is not on Fujifilm's list of approved memory cards, but I've used this in New York. I've given it to Julian Falk, my videographer, and he's used it on various projects. I've used this on various projects. We took this to Stockholm, used it in the XH2S as well as the GFX100. Had no problems, and this is the 1 terabyte card. And when you get to cards this size, 1 terabyte, it is cheaper than, I don't even know if there is a SD card that's this fast that is 1 terabyte. There might be like 1 terabyte SD cards, but they're super slow reading. But for the price that you pay for these, which includes a reader with Per Gear, a fast card reader, it's actually a really good price. And for a camera like this, having both a CF Express Type B and an SD, to me makes sense because it gives you the option to put one or the other. And so talking about stills, 100 megapixels is 100 megapixels. If you have the original GFX100, you're gonna take a huge hit because you paid $10,000 for it. And when I shot this video, I did see some retailers still have it. There's no way you can sell that for $10,000 because this is coming in at $7,500 US. And so if you have one, you won't get $7,500 US for it because this new one is $7,500 US. So you have to, you might be able to sell it for maybe $6,500. So there's $1,000 price difference, and it's used against the brand new latest and greatest. So from $10,000 to $6,500, that's kind of a huge hit. And considering that the GFX100S is actually selling for $5,200 brand new, again, I think the GFX100, to be honest, is maybe worth about $5,000. And to a retailer who has to then resell it, I think it's worth even less, like maybe $4,000 or $4,500. And so, if you had spent $10,000 on GFX100, are you willing to take a $5,500 to $6,000 hit so you can trade that in and then buy this one? I would say hold on to it. If it does everything that you want it to do and you could put up with the weight, which you have up till now, I say just keep it. And in terms of the film simulations or any of the features in here, hopefully if it's not speed centric, so in terms of fast card reading, top FPS and things like that, hopefully in firmware they could add the Reala ACE film simulation, and any other firmware updates have been done on this. But everything else, you're just gonna have to put up with it because it has the older processor in there. And so is it worth the upgrade for the GFX100? Financially, I would say no, but with the upgrading of the battery, the upgrading of the EVF, of the LCD, I don't know if the LCD is upgraded. The I/O on here is nice because of full-size HDMI, which most people wouldn't care about, but even for me, I do care about, because if you do studio work, you want to use an external monitor, which I'm using right now so I can watch myself shooting this video, as well as an Ethernet. And if you are kind of connecting directly to the internet to a computer, it is nice to have proper I/O. Not a fan of this kind of eraser head. It's really sharp on your fingers. Joystick, I think it's like an 8-way or 16-way joystick. It just feels a little clumsy for me, but a lot of people like it, so that's fine. I do like the redesign of the 3 custom function buttons here. I have, what do I have? I have film simulation, ISO, and I have exposure comp on these front 3. I'm still not a fan of the LCD screen where it sort of mimics the 2 dials. It's still a little bit slow, but I think this is the direction Fujifilm's going. I don't mind the slant on it. It doesn't look as cool. See this? You can see the slant on both sides. But it is true, it is a little bit easier. So from this angle, I can see it. Where if this was flat, you'd have to look a bit further down like this. And so for ease of use, it makes sense to have the angle. Again, it has a sort of a brutalist design like the Leica SL series. And so I love this kind of this leatherette that they have. Let's just do this again here. I love this leatherette. I think it looks really cool. And with this removable EVF, I love the squareness. It reminds me of the original GFX50S. So it just looks really cool. Having these extra custom function buttons here. Very functional camera. I really do like it. But as I've said with every GFX camera that I've reviewed, first of all, I'm a fan of light and compact. I have the 3514 on here with a square hood. So this looks nice, it's light, it's compact, and it has that styling that I really prefer. And with the GFX, it's kind of more like a DSLR or high-end mirrorless. I mean, it is a mirrorless, but what I mean is like full frame. So if you are shooting Sony, you're shooting Canon, you're shooting Nikon, and you think about getting into medium format, I mean, it's hard to ignore a 100 megapixel medium format camera with a large sensor like this here. And so for street photography, this is a little bit overkill, but I had fun testing it. But if you're doing landscape photography, architectural, you're doing studio work, you're doing portrait work, you're doing like even outdoor kind of product photography, like vehicle photography, having that 400 megapixel, sort of that, I forgot what it's called, but it combines 20 images and it makes one large image. I mean, having those top-end features is something that most, I think, Fujifilm X shooters, so those of us that are shooting with X series cameras, that's a pretty huge leap from 24, 26 megapixels. Maybe you have a 40 megapixel XH2 or a XT5, but jumping from that to 100, I mean, there's so much cropping room. I cropped a 65 by 24, the X-Pan or the TX1, TX2 crop in, and even with that aggressive crop, you're still getting a 50 megapixel image. And so it's more image than most of us need, but maybe a lot of people want it. For me, I would want to see more compact lenses. This lens is beautiful, 55-1.7. The only negative I have of this lens optically is that the sun stars are just meh. I think Fujifilm's X series 18-1.4, the new 18-1.4, the new 23-1.4, and the new 33-1.4, immaculate sun stars. This one here is meh. It's okay, like a lot of the GFX lenses for sun stars, they're just okay. But besides that, optically, this is great. This is about a 45mm equivalent, which I like 45 because I shoot Minolta, old film cameras, Manufocus, and oftentimes the kit lens was a 45 f2, and even with Minolta M mount with the CLE, they had a 40mm f2. So I'm used to this field of view, and for street work, it's a little tight for me, but you can still pull it off. But for landscape, I don't see landscape photographers using this. But Fujifilm is kind of pushing this as a portrait lens, and I think 45, you can pull it off as a portrait lens where you can work sort of close with your subject, especially if they're couples. If you are a wedding photographer or a fashion photographer and you have two, being further back like an 80mm and being further back, or even a 100 mil, it's nice to be able to work closer with your subject, but you just actually kind of have to watch your aperture. Because at 1.7, if there's even a slight difference between your two subjects, one will be in focus and the other will not be in focus. The autofocus is sped up, the eye control and the subject detect works really well for medium format. But the caveat is still, this is still medium format. And so even though everything is faster, rolling shutter, all that stuff is faster, I could still, in electronic shutter mode, you're still gonna be able to get that wobble if you're not careful. And so if you are coming from GFX, when you shoot this, your perspective is, wow, this is fast, everything is fast. But if you're coming from the X series or from Sony or Canon, you're gonna feel that this is really slow. So one of the things slow is even just going between the EVF and the LCD. It's slow, unless you go into boost mode and everything's boosted, which I don't wanna waste battery. So this kind of feels a little bit slow for me. So you can sort of see here, see that? So it's not like crazy slow, but see how there's a bit of a pause there? So it's not as fast as using the X series, and I'm sure with Sony and Canon it's the same thing. So it is slower. Even the shutter cycle, the moment that you press and the moment the entire exposure is done and then the shutter closes, that cycle. So, you know, like 1/100th of a second is 1/100th of a second. But the cycle of when you press it till the exposure is done, well, that takes a little bit longer because, again, the sensor plane is much bigger, and so it needs more time to open and close. And so as fast as this is, it's still not going to be as fast as an X series, and it's not going to be as fast as the top end 35mm or full frame cameras. But this is getting pretty darn good. Back in the film days, medium format was always slower. Medium format autofocus was really slow and clunky, but you know, you had the advantage of the larger image plane, and the same thing goes with digital. The larger image plane, you're gonna get way better image quality, however, at the expense of speed, size, weight, as well as price. But for $7,500 for the body, that's like the best deal they have so far for the top end body, which is great, and it's modular, so you can actually add the fan. It kind of hides in behind here like this. So it's a very modular system. See that? It pops in like that. So if you're doing video or something where you're in a studio and you're doing, maybe you're doing a 400 megapixel image over and over again, you're tethering and you want to keep this camera cool, you have the option of putting this, as well as it has the optional battery pack, battery grip you can add on here as well. And because this is modular here, as Fujifilm comes up with more accessories, you can just add this over here. The I/O is great. Having the CF Express card here is great. Overall, this is just a fantastic camera that I won't buy because it's way too much camera for me. I'm super happy with the X series. It's more than enough. And one suggestion I have for Fujifilm is give the R a try. The GFX50R, I didn't like it because it was using the older MPT125 battery, which made it really wide and sort of like left heavy. And so it didn't do very well. Fujifilm, if you can consider making another rangefinder styled GFX camera to sort of, you know, appeal to Fujifilm X shooters that love this film styling of the rangefinder style, or an SLR, the old film SLR style, I think the GFX100R would do well, and even making an X100 version of a medium format. So actually having a fixed lens, like having a 45mm f2.8 fixed lens that's built in so it's not removable, and basically creating like a GA645 like back in the film days, or an X100 medium format. So maybe call it a GFXR100, how about that? Or even a GFXR75 or GFXR50, and have it at a really crazy price point. And I think people who typically wouldn't buy into a Fujifilm GFX system would buy a all-in-one medium format point and shoot, if we can even call it that, with its own built-in pop-up flash. I think that would be cool. And so thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Fujifilm, for sending this out to me. Thank you for flying me out to Stockholm to check out this camera and the launch. I had a great time over there. I'll be posting pictures throughout, but overall, I like this camera. Oh, one thing as well, Reala ACE, I think for me, it is my new standard, like sort of a neutral. I've been using Pro Neg standard most of the time for my neutral type photo. Like there's sometimes I want a really stylistic shot when I'm doing street, so I love classic neg. I also like classic chrome. The nostalgic neg is very cool, but sometimes it's a little bit too much, especially if the lighting is very complicated if you're indoors. And so having Reala ACE next to ProNeg Standard, next to Provia, even Provia sometimes feels a little bit too punchy in some situations. So having Reala ACE is really nice. I hope they don't make it proprietary to the GFX system. I hope they, first of all, they push it to the other GFX cameras, which you've done in the past. Pushed a brand new film simulation and then 2 older cameras in the GFX line. So hope they do that with this. And so it keeps the value of GFX100 and the 100S up. And if they could push it all the way back to GFX50S Mark II, that would be fantastic. But even on the top end X series, it would be nice to see Reala ACE. I would definitely shoot with it if they did that. And so again, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I probably won't be borrowing this again, and so if I can't answer your question, I apologize. But if there's a reason for it, like a cool lens, like that tilt shift, if that comes out, I didn't get a chance, I played with it in Stockholm, but I didn't get a chance to shoot with it. Now, if that lens comes out, I would definitely re-borrow this and take it out and shoot with it. And so, yeah, that's it. I'm saying thank you, I think, for the 5th time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon, and happy shooting.